History often feels inevitable when we read it in books. Kings rise, empires fall, wars ignite, and peace treaties carve new borders. But beneath the surface lies a world of fragile choices and unrealized possibilities. Every era contains crossroads where a single decision could have altered the continent's destiny. This is one such imagined path, a world where old crowns cling stubbornly to life, where the echoes of Charlemagne still rumble beneath the marble halls of Vienna, and where World War I becomes the stage for an unexpected resurrection of an ancient order. Welcome to a what-if journey, one where the Holy Roman Empire might have returned from the grave. The Holy Roman Empire's long tale began on a winter morning in the year 800, when Charlemagne received the imperial crown during Christmas Mass. For over 1,000 years, that empire, sprawling, chaotic, and uniquely European, served as a guardian of tradition and a buffer between rival kingdoms. Yet by the dawn of the 19th century, its authority had eroded into symbolism. Napoleon's creation of the Confederation of the Rhine in July 1806 delivered the final blow, and on August 6th, Emperor Francis II formally ended the empire. But the idea of the Holy Roman Empire didn't die with the decree. Francis quickly established the Austrian Empire, trying to preserve the spirit of the old order. After Napoleon's downfall, some believed that the ancient empire might re-emerge in a new form. That hope evaporated as Austria drifted into decline, especially after its crushing defeat by Prussia in 1866. By the early 20th century, Austria-Hungary was a shadow of its former self, divided, exhausted, and held together by little more than habit. Yet in 1878, during Austria's inconsistent victory in Bosnia, a realization sparked inside Vienna's military elite. They had won, yes, but the campaign revealed alarming weaknesses. Fearing the storms to come, the empire began modernizing. The unified imperial army was broken apart into Austrian and Hungarian branches, each updating doctrine and equipment. Progress moved like cold molasses, and Archduke Franz Ferdinand pushed relentlessly for faster reform. Then, in 1905, an unexpected breakthrough appeared. Günther Burstein's armored vehicle concept, a proto-tank decades ahead of its time. Engineers refined the design, and by the time war loomed, Austria had nearly 400 of these early tanks. It was the kind of innovation that, had circumstances aligned, might have powered a reborn Holy Roman Empire into the modern age. While researching military technology recently, I stumbled onto an article discussing SpaceX spy satellites being quietly used by the United States. Using today's sponsor, Ground News, I examined how 57 different global outlets covered the story. With their browser extension, I could instantly check bias distribution, compare reporting styles, and view full coverage from Italian and Russian sources. Despite different perspectives, the headlines were surprisingly aligned. The platform uses independent fact-checkers, detailed ownership charts, and even offers a mobile app for quick access. If you want to analyze the news the way historians analyze sources, head to ground.news dentist for 30% off the Vantage plan, or try it this month for under $1. Now back to our alternate path. On June 28, 1914, a gunshot in Sarajevo shattered the fragile balance. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand plunged Austria-Hungary into the Great War. Vienna swiftly crushed Serbia, allowing Germany to intensify its western offensive. But on April 26, 1915, Italy joined the Entente and declared war a month later. General Luigi Cadorna, stubborn and unimaginative, hurled his men into one doomed assault after another. Thousands died for a handful of meters. In June 1916, Austria retaliated with the Punishment Expedition, storming across the Alps. The victory at Asiago cracked Italy's northern defenses. The Italian front collapsed toward the coast, losing over 200,000 men. Desperate for survival, Italy sued for peace. But Germany pressured Austria to demand the full restoration of Venetia and Lombardy, too much for Italy to accept. The war dragged on. Austria pressed deeper, seizing Milan. Meanwhile, the Italian army disintegrated. Strikes paralyzed factories. Desertions gutted whole divisions. Cities erupted with socialist, separatist, and fascist uprisings. The government collapsed under its own weight. Romania entered the war to distract the Habsburgs, but Hungary's armored divisions crushed them with terrifying speed.
Then chaos deepened. King Victor Emmanuel III was assassinated by socialist radicals. The royal family fled to England as Italy descended into civil war. Sensing opportunity, the Catholic Church stepped onto the stage. Since the papacy had never recognized the Italian state, Pope Benedict XV threw his support behind Austria in exchange for the restoration of lost church territory. Priests denounced the Italian government. Religious fervor and fanaticism flared across the peninsula. Germany, watching Austria's unexpected resurgence, felt both astonished and uneasy. Vienna's priorities shifted increasingly toward Italy, prompting Germany to accelerate its own plans, sending Lenin to Russia earlier than in our timeline, hoping to destabilize the East. On November 21st, Emperor Franz Joseph passed away. His 29-year-old successor, Karl, inherited a collapsing empire and a war spiraling out of control. Idealistic yet pragmatic, Karl sought to reshape the conflict. He separated Austrian and Hungarian forces from German command, hoping to regain autonomy. Secretly, he pursued peace. Germany, believing in its own strength, never sent the Zimmermann telegram in this alternate world. Berlin assumed the Central Powers still held the upper hand. Then, in January 1917, Austria captured Rome. The Pope celebrated a liberation and pressed Karl to go further, to fully subdue Italy and restore a version of the medieval order lost centuries before. Karl hesitated, intrigued but wary. Austrian forces shattered the last Italian armies at Capua, ending Italy as a unified nation. Ancient duchies and kingdoms were revived under Habsburg control.
France seized Savoy as a defensive barrier, while Britain occupied Sardinia. Italy burned in civil war, but Austrian-backed regimes supported by religious zealots crushed every rebellion. The Pope became, informally, the spiritual sovereign of Italy. For the first time in generations, the Church wielded genuine temporal influence. Meanwhile, Russia's military failures sparked a massive Bolshevik uprising. In late April, Lenin's revolution toppled the old order. The new Soviet regime begged the Central Powers for peace. Karl and Wilhelm II discussed the future map of Eastern Europe, but Germany dismissed Austria's preferred Polish solution, angering Karl. Wilhelm hinted that peace with the Entente was near, yet secretly fantasized about marching to Paris like his grandfather. Karl sensed the betrayal and opened covert negotiations with France. This became the Sixes Affair, a clandestine diplomatic dance that London quietly approved. Austria agreed to return Alsace-Lorraine to France and support Belgian independence. In June, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk tore apart the former Russian Empire, installing German puppet states across the east. Austria-Hungary gained little, and resentment simmered. By now, Austrian and Hungarian armies had fully separated from German command. Germany expected Austria to attack Provence, but Austrian and French troops, unaware of the Sixes negotiations, dug trenches instead. Low-level clashes followed. Then came the Treaty of Bucharest. Romania surrendered small territories to Hungary and Bessarabia to Ukraine. Germany, growing desperate, searched for any possible path to victory. Rumors of U.S. intervention terrified Berlin. With public morale crumbling, Wilhelm II attempted a bold and reckless maneuver. Germany invaded Switzerland. He believed the local Germans there would welcome the Kaiser's troops. Instead, the invasion triggered slaughter and international outrage. German troops committed brutal atrocities, massacring wounded Entente soldiers. Karl was horrified. He had believed peace was near. Determined to end the war before Europe collapsed entirely, Austria reversed its approach. The new Sixes terms gave France control of the Saarland, border regions in Belgium and Switzerland, full independence for Serbia, and all Italian colonies that Austria nominally administered. In return, France recognized the dissolution of Italy and granted Austria a sphere of influence over a future fragmented Germany. In September, Habsburg Italian divisions, technically neutral, marched into Switzerland to support battered French and British units. Together, they pushed the Germans back. Austria signed an armistice with the Entente, infuriating Wilhelm, who now blamed Bismarck's ghost for leaving Austria uncrushed decades earlier. Austria issued a public ultimatum demanding that Germany accept peace. Karl accused Wilhelm II of starving his own people, destroying cities, and sacrificing millions for negligible territorial gains.
even though Germany had already achieved massive victories in the east.
Wilhelm refused. Instead, he unleashed a wave of anti-Austrian propaganda as Germany plunged toward collapse. Protest movements began erupting throughout the fractured German Empire, appearing first as scattered demonstrations and quickly swelling into mass uprisings. Years of hunger, bombardments, and political humiliation had pushed the population beyond its breaking point. The final shock came when Austria released damning evidence showing that the German government had secretly provided aid to Lenin and the Soviet leadership. For ordinary Germans already terrified of Bolshevism, this felt like the ultimate betrayal. Accusations flooded the streets. The Kaiser had helped unleash the very ideology Germans despised most. Newspapers, unions, veterans groups, and even conservative politicians demanded an end to the monarchy. The uproar was so sudden and so intense that Emperor Karl of Austria recognized the opportunity immediately. Declaring that brotherly intervention was necessary to protect the German people from their own collapsing leadership, Austria-Hungary marched north. Austria enters Germany, not as conquerors, but as correctors. Berlin was stunned. For months, Germany had believed Austria was scaling back its military involvement, drained by its brutal Italian campaigns and Balkan crises. Instead, veteran Austrian divisions moved with calm precision. They refused to shell German cities. They avoided unnecessary clashes. They treated every encounter not like an invasion, but like a solemn duty to restore order. In southern Germany, where devastation and famine had reduced entire towns to despair, people did not resist. Many welcomed the Austrians as a saner, steadier branch of the same German family, something far removed from a foreign enemy. To them, Austria felt like the old Holy Roman tradition stepping in to save what remained of the German world, not destroy it. Within 2 weeks, the pressure became unbearable. Wilhelm II abdicated, fleeing Germany and leaving the throne to his inexperienced son, Wilhelm III. The new Kaiser immediately sought negotiations, both with Austria and the Entente, hoping to salvage whatever dignity remained. The Treaty of Vienna, Europe redrawn. What emerged was the monumental Treaty of Vienna, ratified in 1918. It reshaped Europe more radically than any agreement since the Napoleonic era. France reclaimed Alsace-Lorraine, the Saar region, Nice, Savoy, and several Italian territories. The German Empire, only decades old yet already scarred by conflict, was dissolved. From its ruins rose a revived Holy Roman Empire, a sprawling, decentralized federation uniting Germany and the Italian states under Habsburg rule. Far from fearing this rebirth, the Entente approved of it. They believed a diverse, politically fragmented empire would serve as a stable buffer, too internally complex to launch further expansionist wars. Prussia lost portions of the Rhineland and Hanover. Hanover's throne passed to the young Frederick of Hohenzollern-Hanover, a 27-year-old monarch suddenly thrust into a world of ancient crowns and terrifying new ideologies. Switzerland, Belgium, and Luxembourg were all granted additional territory and, astonishingly, joined the new empire. Reconstruction funding poured into these regions with the promise that future referendums would determine their long-term status. Germany's internal borders were reimagined. Livonia became a Prussian puppet. The Polish border shrank. Meanwhile, Archduke Karl Albrecht, long sympathetic to the Polish cause, was crowned King of Poland. He had fought on Poland's battlefields and spoke the language fluently, making him more Polish than many of the Polish aristocrats themselves. To maintain stability, Austria relinquished the Polish regions of Galicia and Lodomeria, strengthening the new Polish kingdom instead of dividing it. Britain handed Sardinia to the Habsburg Kingdom of Sicily. German colonies were divided historically. Italy's overseas territories went to France. Crucially, this treaty wasn't designed as a punishment. Unlike the Versailles Treaty of our timeline, Vienna's agreement aimed to create durable balance, not humiliation. A crown reforged in Rome. Karl soon traveled to Rome for one of the most symbolic events in modern European history. In a ceremony echoing the medieval splendor of the past, the Pope crowned him Emperor Charles VII, the first Holy Roman Emperor crowned in Rome since Charlemagne's era. Rome became the ceremonial capital, while Naples, Vienna, Berlin, and Aachen served as the empire's administrative seats of power.
25 free imperial cities were revived to encourage local autonomy, economic freedom, and cultural preservation. New prince-electors were established, with Austria intentionally given a commanding influence. The empire reorganized into imperial circles, each with distinct responsibilities for defense, taxation, and representation. A new constitution, the Golden Bull of 1918, inspired partly by Rerum Novarum, defined the empire's political structure. It protected workers' rights and collective bargaining while outlawing communism, fascism, and radical nationalism. The Catholic Church gained extraordinary influence. No emperor could reign without papal approval or coronation in Rome. In essence, spiritual authority and political sovereignty became interwoven again, reviving a medieval harmony long thought impossible. Forging a new imperial system. The imperial army was placed under Austrian supervision. Each member state was required to contribute at least 1% of its military-age men. Troops were deliberately stationed outside their home regions to prevent nationalist uprisings. Larger states were strictly forbidden from fielding independent armies. Only small, heavily regulated militias were permitted. Economically, the empire embraced free internal trade. The Austrian krone and German mark were merged into the gold-backed Kronenthaler. Only Switzerland and Belgium retained limited monetary independence. Because economic disparities ran deep, imperial funding concentrated on free cities to stimulate commerce and industrial growth across the Federation. Communist fires spread east and west. The Soviet Union wasted no time exploiting Germany's collapse. Lenin renounced the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk and poured troops into Belarus and Ukraine, capturing them with dizzying speed. Lithuania and Latvia also buckled, surrendering before overwhelming Red Army offensives. These victories ignited communist uprisings across Europe. The largest revolts emerged within the German heartlands of the empire, led by the Spartacus League. For months, industrial cities transformed into war zones. Prussian and Austrian forces battled block by block to crush Marxist militias. Eventually, socialism and communism were eradicated within the empire's borders. But new flames erupted elsewhere. Hungary plunged into a Marxist rebellion, forcing Karl to deploy Austrian troops once again. The aftermath allowed him to create the new kingdom of Croatia-Slavonia, meant to calm the ethnic storms of the Balkans. While Europe bled, the Red Army seized Vilnius. The collapse of the eastern borders forced Austria and Prussia to intervene again, supporting Poland with weapons, advisors, and troops. After 3 exhausting years, Russia finally relented and signed the Treaty of Minsk. Poland expanded dramatically into a revived Polish-Lithuanian-Ruthenian Commonwealth, designed as a powerful buffer between the empire and Soviet aggression. Ukraine was dissolved and replaced by the Principality of Moldavia in Bessarabia. The Great Depression and the strengthening of empire. The global economic collapse of 1929 hit the Holy Roman Empire like a hammer. Industries stalled. Agricultural regions starved. Trade networks fractured overnight. But the empire's sheer size and diversity allowed it to recover gradually. Karl seized the crisis to centralize economic authority, streamlining trade, unifying currency systems, and intensifying internal development. The empire gradually became self-sufficient, less dependent on British or French markets. Britain and France watched all this with growing dread. The empire had survived its near collapse and emerged stronger, more cohesive, and more ambitious. France faced its own nightmare. Without Versailles reparations, which never existed, France struggled under the weight of old debts. The integration of new territories worsened internal tensions. The economy collapsed completely in 1932. The result was a new French Civil War. Republicans, communists, monarchists, regional separatists, each faction claimed to be France's salvation. Terrified of a communist encirclement, the Holy Roman Empire backed the monarchists, then shifted support to separatists when the royalists faltered. By 1935, the communists had technically won, but France no longer resembled its former self. Brittany and Corsica achieved full independence. Brittany adopted a conservative Breton nationalist government under Jean-Marie Perrault, while Corsica joined the Genoese sphere. Elsewhere, Serbia, Romania, Turkey, and Greece succumbed to communist revolutions as the Great Depression devoured their economies. Spain burns, and the Habsburgs expand again. The Spanish Civil War erupted in 1936.
The Habsburgs supported the Carlists, traditionalist, Catholic, rural, deeply anti-communist. Their supporters were peasants, provincial workers, and devout Catholics seeking autonomy and protection from radical ideologies. The price for Habsburg support was steep. Alonso Carlos had to name Karl Pius of Sicily as his heir. After considerable political pressure and material incentives, Alonso Carlos agreed. He died months later, leaving Karl Pius to inherit the Carlist claim. Without fascist Italy or Nazi Germany, the nationalists lacked the foreign support they enjoyed in our timeline. The Soviets struggled to send aid through a fragmented and hostile Europe. France, nearly destroyed by its own revolution, could offer little. The Carlists failed to take Catalonia, but negotiated a territorial deal with France to end the fighting. By 1939, the Carlists emerged victorious, and Karl Pius was crowned King Carlos II of Spain. Spain was reorganized into a dual monarchy of Aragon and Castile, while Sardinia and Sicily were integrated into its administrative network. Political parties were abolished. Regional languages and cultures received new protections. Spain stabilized under a uniquely Habsburg-style authoritarian traditionalism. France, surrounded and fearful, began accelerating its military modernization. Europe braces for the next Great War. The Soviet Union completed the Great Purge and rebuilt its armies. France, ideologically aligned with the USSR, joined the Comintern. Together, they crafted a secret objective: destroy the Holy Roman Empire and the new Polish Commonwealth.
Erase the old world order. Ignite a global communist revolution. Tension exploded when a communist assassin murdered the Polish crown prince Karl Stefan during a state visit to Kiev. Poland hesitated at first, but Austria and Prussia promised absolute military support. Within mere weeks, Europe collapsed into war once more. Poland, the Holy Roman Empire, and Spain versus the Soviet Union, France, and a coalition of communist-aligned states. The continent stood at the edge of a storm greater than anything seen in centuries. Would the Comintern shatter the ancient crowns of Europe and sweep away the old world forever? Or would the resurrected Holy Roman Empire, armed with tradition, unity, and fire, rise to defend the last bastion of monarchic civilization? The fate of the world hung in the balance.